Hello everybody, Jeremy Dickinson here. Thank you for watching. In this video I want to talk about the Hindu claim that we get from the Upanishads that Atman is Brahman, which means, if you've been following my videos on religion and Hinduism, you'll note that Atman is the name that we have in the Hindu tradition for the self, what we essentially are. So the self may be, if you think about um, the Hindu conception of the self that we find in the Upanishads, the self may involve different layers, if you will, of being. And at the very core of what we are is claimed Atman, which is really a state of bliss. And as other parts of the self in the Hindu tradition, the Upanishadic tradition, we see that there's like an outer layer of awareness, and then the inner layers of just increasing understanding. So we move from just basically simple conscious awareness to a kind of understanding, turned inward to a kind of self-understanding. And at the core of the Upanishadic conception of the self is the Atman, which is what we essentially are. And the claim that I'm taking up in this video, and I've talked about in other videos, is the claim that Atman is Brahman. And Brahman, we know, is the name for the one underlying fundamental reality of everything, the one God, if you will, that the Hindus believe in. And it's the one God that accounts for everything that exists, that ultimately is identical with everything that exists, including the pantheon of gods that the Hindus would believe in a sense. These manifestations of Brahman, Vishnu and Shiva and Shakti, they are all but avatars or manifestations of Brahman. Now, the claim is, as I've stated now several times, Atman is Brahman, and I wanted to look at a couple key passages from the Upanishads where this idea is developed. And I'll refer you to my video lecture on the claim that Atman is Brahman, the Upanishadic conception of human nature, where at the end of that video I discuss an argument that one can tease out of certain passages in the Upanishads for the claim that Atman is Brahman. But here in this video I'd like to look at a few of the passages that are relevant to provide some kind of textual understanding for the claim that Atman is Brahman. So it begins, at least for our purposes, in what's known as the Katha Upanishad. And here we have a figure named Nachiketas. And Nachiketas is a very devout yogi who is very religious, and he goes seeking answers to the big questions of life and death by going to Yama, the god of death in the Hindu tradition. And so Nachiketas goes to Yama, and he shows up, and death is away when he shows up. But when death returns, he feels bad that he kept Nachiketas, this earnest yogi, waiting, and so he gives Nachiketas 3 wishes. And with the first wish, Nachiketas just asks that his father's anxiety be relieved. Nachiketas is away from his father currently, and so he has immediate concern for his family, and wants his family, in particular his father, to be feeling secure and not anxious about what's happening with his son. And then his second wish is to know the secrets of the fire sacrifice, the sacrifices that we find discussed in the Vedas and practiced by the Vedic Brahmin priests. And he wants to know the secrets of the fire sacrifice, not for the sake of his own happiness that would come from propitiating the gods, but for the sake of all people. And so we see unselfish motives here from Nachiketas. And then the third wish, with the third wish, Nachiketa wishes to know the secrets of death. He wants to know what happens when we die. And as we see in the Katha Upanishads, death is reluctant to grant this wish for Nachiketas, and continues repeatedly to ask Nachiketas to request something else. He can have whatever else he wants, but he can't have this one. And so Death says in response to Nachiketas, who continues to ask for the answers to the questions involving what happens when we die, and Death says, even the gods had this doubt in times of old. For mysterious is the law of life and death. Ask for another boon, another wish. Release me from this. And Nachiketas replies by saying, this doubt indeed arose even to the gods, and you say, O death, that it is difficult to understand, but no greater teacher than you can explain it, and there's no other boon so great as this. And Death replies by saying, take horses and gold and cattle and elephants, choose sons and grandsons that shall live 100 years, have vast expanses of land, and live as many years as you desire. Or choose another gift that you think equal to this, and enjoy it with wealth and long life. Be the ruler of a vast earth, and I will grant you all of your desires. Ask for any wishes in the world, Death continues, and I will grant you all your desires. But ask me not, Nachiketas, Death continues, the secrets of death. So Nachiketas, continues, and he says, all the pleasures pass away, O end of life. They weaken the power of life, and indeed how short is all life. Keep thy horses dancing and singing. Man cannot be satisfied with wealth. Man can't be satisfied with all the gifts that Death is willing to bestow upon Nachiketas in lieu of the answering or providing the gift in answering Nachiketas' request to know what the secrets of death are. And Death said, there is the path of joy, there is the path of pleasure, both attract the soul. Who follows the first comes to good, who follows pleasure reaches not the end. So we see Death saying there's two paths you can take. There's a path of joy and there's a path of pleasure. Okay? And those who takes the path of joy is the one who takes the right path. The one who takes the path of pleasure takes the wrong path. Taking the path of joy is going to lead you to your good. So this tells us that according to the Upanishadic tradition, goodness isn't just having your pleasure satisfied. In fact, there's something much deeper, something much better than being pleased or living the pleasant life. It's living the joyous life, and these are distinct from each other. Who follows pleasure reaches not the end, with a capital E. Sometimes the end here is capitalized here in the text that you would read. So it's following the path of joy that leads to the end, not the path of pleasure. And then Death continues saying, the two paths lie in front of man, in front of people. Pondering on them, the wise man chooses the path of joy, the fool takes the path of pleasure. You have pondered, Nachiketas, on pleasures, and you have rejected them. You have not accepted the chain of possessions wherewith men bind themselves, and beneath which they sink. So when you attach yourself to the pleasure, you take the path of pleasure, you bind yourself down and you hold yourself down. And then there's the path of wisdom and the path of ignorance, where the path of wisdom is going to be the path of joy, and the path of ignorance is going to be the path of pleasure. They are far apart and lead to different ends. You are, Nachiketas, a follower of the path of wisdom. Many pleasures tempt you not. And so Death ends up really extolling the life that Nachiketas is living and saying, you're choosing the right path, and these are good things to hear. And he thinks that Nachiketas' path is a wonderful one. His desire is a wonderful one. And Death continues in the Katha Upanishad by saying, Atman, the spirit of vision, is never born and never dies. This is Atman. This is the deepest part of what we are, our true essence. Before him there was nothing, and he is one forevermore. So here we start seeing Atman being described in the way that Brahman would be described, as eternal and unchanging and one. Never born and eternal. This is Atman still. Beyond times gone or to come, he does not die when the body dies. Atman does not die when the body dies. The body is changing. The body is not eternal, but what is essential to us is eternal and does not undergo change. It does not die. If the slayer thinks that he kills, and if the slain thinks that he dies, neither knows the way of truth or the ways of truth. The eternal man cannot kill. The eternal man cannot die. So kill me, or you think by killing me, you're killing me. Would be a better way of putting it. In fact, what you're doing is you're killing my body, but you cannot kill me, because what I am is ultimately an eternal, immortal being. So has it in the Upanishads. Concealed in the heart of all beings is the Atman, the spirit, the self with a capital F, capital S. Smaller than the smallest atom, greater than the vast spaces. The man who surrenders his human will leaves sorrow behind and beholds the glory of Atman by the grace of the Creator, who is Brahman. Not even through deep knowledge can the Atman be reached unless evil ways are abandoned. And there is rest in the senses, concentration of the mind, and peace in one's heart. So how is it that we are to come to know the Atman? Well, this is really the path of liberation. This is the path to what's called in the Hindu tradition, as I've discussed in another video lecture, the path to moksha, the path of liberation. And how do we get there? Well, we get there through practicing yoga, according to the Upanishadic tradition. And this is a path that's very, very difficult to follow and to live up to. It said that this liberation, this path that we take to liberation, right? It's narrow as a razor's edge. Okay, and so we see that Atman is being identified as, being categorized as the very same thing that we would say of Brahman. So here we find, and still in the Katha Upanishad, this passage: as fire, though one, takes new forms in all things that burn, the spirit with a capital S, Brahman, takes though one thing takes form in all things that live, he is within all and is also outside. As the wind, though one, takes new forms in whatever it enters, the spirit, again Brahman, though one takes new form in all things that live, he is within all and also outside. He is the eternal among things that pass away, pure consciousness of conscious beings, the one that fulfills the prayers of the many. Only the wise see him in their souls and will attain the peace eternal. And so the way that we're going to achieve an understanding of ourselves as Atman, which is Brahman, is through this practice of yoga. And in the Katha Upanishad, you get a kind of description in places of what yoga looks like as a practice. When the five senses, the passages go, are and the mind are still, the reason rests in silence, and then begins the path supreme. This calm steadiness of the senses is called yoga. Then one should become watchful, because yoga comes and goes. When all desires that cling to the heart are surrendered, then immortal becomes immortal. And even in this world, he is one with Brahman. He is one with Brahman. Okay? And literally identical with Brahman, the same as Brahman. When all the ties that bind the heart are unloosened, then immortal becomes immortal. This is the sacred teaching. And later in another passage in the Upanishads, we receive a passage, it's the Chandogya Upanishad, where we get the famous passage, "Thou art that." And it involves a story of a boy named Svetaketu who goes and studies the Vedas and comes back and learns from his father that he is Brahman, that he essentially is Brahman in his core. So at the very end of this this version of the Upanishad, we get this: the father then said to his son in the same way, "O son, you cannot see the spirit, but in truth he is here. An invisible but subtle essence is the spirit of the whole universe. That is reality, that is truth, and thou are that. Okay, thank you for watching, everybody.